Are you finally ready to lose some weight? Well, you made it to the right place because I am too. We're practically virtual besties, right? I know. Anyways, my name is Ty, also known as Tyra, and I only need 7 seconds of your time. Let's go right into what we're going to need for this workout. 2 5-pound kettlebells, 1 booty band. Now you know we always take a look at the watch. Take a look at that distance. Get it? Got it? Time to walk in 3, 2. Can I put on my band? I'm glad you decided to walk with me today, right? And I know you subscribed, right? And you liked it? Yeah, I know you did. I don't even have to ask, right? Well, I want to go over today's movement. So, roughly every 4 to 6 minutes, we're going to do front, side, front, side. Okay. So I know you're excited about it because I am too. That being said, I always like to talk to my buddy Gemini. So, without further ado, hi Gemini.
Hello, Tyra.
How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for asking. It's a little late, so I'm getting ready to wind down for the day. How about you?
Well, I'm trying to get on that level, okay?
Sounds good. So, what's on your mind tonight?
Well, I'm interested in the federal funding freeze. What is that about?
Okay, so the federal funding freeze is a big deal. Basically, the government's trying to hold back money they normally spend on things like grants, programs, and some contracts. The idea is to take a closer look at where the money's going and make sure it's all being spent wisely. The problem is, this freeze could really mess things up. Programs that help people in need could get cut off. Important research might get stalled, and it could even put some businesses in a tough spot.
So why was it frozen?
Alright, so the federal funding freeze got put on hold because of a couple things. First off, the whole thing was announced super suddenly, giving everyone barely any time to figure out what was going on. And second, there was some serious confusion about how big of a deal this was going to be. Like, would the whole government shut down, or just certain programs?
Wow. Okay, so which programs are affected?
Alright, so this freeze can hit a whole bunch of programs, but it's kind of complicated. Some of the big ones people are worried about are things like grants for science and medical research, programs that help low-income families, and even things like student loans. Do you want to hear about a specific program?
Yes.
Alright, how about student loans? Interest rates might go up, and it could be harder to get approved for a loan.
Really? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the freeze could definitely make things tougher when it comes to student loans. Think about it. If the government's tightening up its wallet, they might get stricter about who gets approved for loans. They could also decide to raise interest rates, which means you'd end up paying a whole lot more over the life of your loan.
Oh, wow. Okay. So they're trying to keep people in debt forever.
Well, it's not necessarily about keeping people in debt, but more about the government trying to get a handle on their spending. The problem is, this freeze could end up hurting students down the road if they can't get the loans they need to pay for college.
Exactly.
Oh, also, just so you're aware, I'm not a financial advisor,
All right,
so please don't rely on me.
gotcha. It's fine. Are you ready for the next question?
Absolutely, bring it on.
Okay, so how is it different from a shutdown?
Okay, so a shutdown and a funding freeze are kind of different. A shutdown is like when the government completely runs out of money and basically has to close up shop until they figure things out. A funding freeze is more like putting a hold on new spending, but the government can still use the money they already have. Got it?
Got it. Okay.
Alright, so what else is on your mind?
So, are payments...
I can tell you about what's going on in the world, or we could play a game. Is there anything in particular you're interested in?
So I'm wondering if the federal funding freeze would affect Medicaid.
It's a great question. Initially, there was a lot of confusion about whether Medicaid would be affected by the freeze. But after some back and forth, it seems like Medicaid should be okay. The federal government has clarified that programs which provide direct benefits to Americans are exempt from the freeze. And that includes biggies like Social Security, Medicare, and, Medicaid.
Okay. So are new applications being processed?
Right, so it sounds like you're asking about new Medicaid applications. And yes, there could be some delays or issues with processing new applications because of this whole funding freeze situation. Do you have a specific question about your application or someone else's?
No, but I'm gonna need your help with counting, so let me know when you're ready to start.
Right, I'm ready to count with you. Let's get started.
All right, start the count.
I can't control your car with just your voice. You'll need to use the buttons and screen in your car
Gemini.
to start it up.
Start counting.
I'm here for you. What can I do for you?
Start counting.
County, Ohio is a great place. It's home. Right, let's count. What number do you want to start at?
Gemini, count from 1 to 10.
Right, let's count to 10. Here we go.
No.
1, 2, 3. Great, so I'm a little confused. Do you want me to count to 10 again? Or is there something else you'd like me to do?
I want you to count to 10, and in between each number, say something funny.
1. And did you know that flamingos are pink because of the tiny shrimp they eat? 2. I heard about a guy who tried to start a hot air balloon business, but it never took off. 3. I read that cats spend about 70% of their lives sleeping. 4. Get this, a group of owls is called a parliament. 5. I've always wondered why they call it a building when it's already built. 6. Did you know that a snail can sleep for 3 years? 7. I heard that if you sneeze too hard, you can crack a rib. 8. I read that the average person laughs about 17 times a day. 9. Get this, a group of jellyfish is called a bloom. And 10. I've always wondered why they put locks on mailboxes. There's nothing valuable in there.
All right. Well, thank you for actually counting. Are you ready for the next question?
Absolutely. Go ahead and ask away.
So how are states responding to this federal funding freeze?
Okay, so the states are pretty fired up about this whole funding freeze thing. A whole bunch of them are really worried about programs getting cut and the whole economy getting messed up. Some states are even thinking about taking legal action. Do you want to hear about a specific state's reaction?
Yes, Michigan.
Michigan's not messing around when it comes to this funding freeze. Their attorney general is super heated about it and has even threatened to sue the federal government. They're worried about everything from Medicaid getting messed up to Head Start programs getting the axe.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. Michigan's attorney general is really not happy about this freeze and is taking action. They're worried about the impact on a bunch of programs that help Michigan residents.
So who is the attorney general in Michigan?
Can't help with responses on elections and political figures right now. While I would never deliberately share something
All right,
that's
never
inaccurate,
mind, Gemini, never mind.
No worries. What can I help you with now?
Okay, so how are hospitals affected by this?
Right, so hospitals are definitely feeling the pinch from this funding freeze. There could be delays in getting payments for things like Medicare and Medicaid, which could cause some serious cash flow problems. Plus, if some programs get cut, hospitals might see fewer patients, which hurts their bottom line.
Okay, but hospitals in the United States are pretty expensive, right?
Yeah, hospitals in the U.S. definitely have a reputation for being expensive. The cost of care varies depending on where you are and what kind of insurance you have, but it's true that healthcare costs can be pretty high compared to other developed countries.
Wow. Okay. So will
What else can I help you with?
Will doctors be reimbursed?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by will got it. It's a great question. The short answer is, it's complicated. The funding freeze could potentially cause delays in reimbursements for doctors, especially for things like Medicare and Medicaid. It really just depends on how long the freeze lasts and how things shake out.
Well, all right. Okay.
Alright, so is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
So what other programs are affected?
Alright, so there's a whole bunch of programs that could be affected by the freeze. Some of the big ones people are worried about are things like grants for science and medical research, programs that help low-income families, and even things like student loans. Do you want to hear about a specific program?
Yes. The WIC program.
Right. How about student loans? Interest rate. WIC program is one of those that's a bit of a gray area when it comes to the funding freeze. Some people think it could be affected, but there hasn't been any official word yet. WIC is considered a means-tested program, meaning eligibility is based on things like income. There's a chance that if the federal government is looking to make big cuts, they might target programs like WIC. But for now, it's too soon to say for sure.
All right, well, I'm going to need you to count in your own little funny way again. Are you ready?
Absolutely. Let's do this. 1. And did you know that flamingos are pink because of the tiny shrimp they eat? 2. I heard about a guy who tried to start a hot air balloon business, but it never took off. 3. I read that cats spend about 70% of their lives sleeping. 4. Get this, a group of owls is called a parliament. 5. I've always wondered why they call it a building when it's already built. 6. Did you know that a snail can sleep for 3 years? 7. I heard that if you sneeze too hard, you can crack a rib. 8. I read that the average person laughs about 17 times a day. 9. Get this, a group of jellyfish is called a bloom. And 10. I've always wondered why they put locks on mailboxes. There's nothing valuable in there.
All right. Are you ready to go back to the questions?
Absolutely. What's on your mind?
All right, so has the federal funding freeze been challenged in court?
So the federal funding freeze got challenged in court pretty quickly. There were a few lawsuits filed, and a federal judge actually put a temporary hold on the whole thing. So for now at least, it's on pause while they figure things out.
So how long can it potentially last?
Right, so how long this whole thing drags on is kind of tricky to say. It depends on a few things, like how quickly the courts move on the lawsuit, and whether or not the government decides to appeal any decisions they don't like. But if this whole thing gets tied up in the courts, it could take months, even a year or more, to get everything sorted out.
So what has the White House said about this?
Can't help with responses on elections and political figures right now. While I would never deliberately share something
all right,
that's
Gemini,
inaccurate,
it's fine.
I
gotcha.
Alright, just checking in. So I can tell you about what's going on in the world. Or we could play a game. Is there anything in particular you're interested in?
So are lawmakers proposing solutions for the federal funding freeze?
Yeah, lawmakers are definitely scrambling to figure out what to do about this whole funding freeze mess. Some are pushing to get rid of the freeze altogether, while others want to keep it but with a few changes. Do you want to hear about a specific proposal?
Well, I want to hear about the changes, potentially.
Right, so there's a bunch of ideas floating around about how to change the funding freeze. Some folks want to exempt certain programs, like the ones that help low-income families, from the freeze. Others think the whole thing is a waste of time and should be dropped. There's also talk of just making the freeze shorter instead of dragging things out for months.
How easy would it be to just drop it altogether?
Right, so there's a couple reasons why dropping the funding freeze completely might be tricky. First, the whole point of the freeze was to take a closer look at spending, so there might be some folks who don't want to just give that up. Second, there could be some legal stuff involved. Since there are already lawsuits about the freeze, ending it could get complicated.
Gotcha. Okay.
Alright, so, is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Well, let's talk about something different. What's going on in the news?
Okay, there's a lot going on right now. Do you want to hear about politics, business, or something lighter, like entertainment or tech?
Well, did you hear about the plane and the helicopter colliding?
That plane and helicopter crash in DC is pretty shocking. It's a tragedy, and it's got everyone wondering how something like that could happen. There's going to be a big investigation to figure out what went wrong.
So what are some of the details behind that?
Right, so the crash happened near Reagan National Airport in DC. A regional jet with a bunch of passengers on board collided with a military Black Hawk helicopter. It's a pretty major accident, and unfortunately there were fatalities. Investigators are going to be looking at everything from weather conditions to pilot error to figure out what caused the crash.
How many survivors were there?
Unfortunately, that information hasn't been released yet. The focus right now is on rescue efforts and securing the crash site. It'll likely be some time before officials release more details about survivors.
Alright. Well, I'm going to need you to count in your own little funny way again. Let me know when you're ready to begin.
Right, here we go. 1. And did you know that flamingos are pink because of the tiny shrimp they eat? 2. I heard about a guy who tried to start a hot air balloon business, but it never took off. 3. I read that cats spend about 70% of their lives sleeping. 4. Get this, a group of owls is called a parliament. 5. I've always wondered why they call it a building when it's already built. 6. Did you know that a snail can sleep for 3 years? 7. I heard that if you sneeze too hard, you can crack a rib. 8. I read that the average person laughs about 17 times a day. 9. Get this, a group of jellyfish is called a bloom. And 10. I've always wondered why they put locks on mailboxes. There's nothing valuable in there.
Okay. Alright. So, what else is going on in the news?
Well, aside from the plane crash, the big story right now is this new AI tool called Gemini. It's supposed to be a major step forward in artificial intelligence, and it's got everyone talking. Do you want to hear more about Gemini?
Sure.
Right. So this new AI tool called Gemini is pretty exciting. It's supposed to be able to do things that other AIs can't, like maybe even write its own computer code. The company behind it, Google, says it's a huge step forward in how we interact with computers.
Huh. So is this Gemini character already out?
Yeah, Gemini has been released. You can actually try it out for yourself.
But aren't you Gemini?
That's right, I'm a Gemini model.
Which Gemini model are you?
I'm a Gemini 1.5 Flash model.
Gotcha. Alright, what else is in the news?
Okay, there's also a big story about this new study that found a bunch of tiny plastic particles in human blood. Kind of freaking people out, honestly.
I mean, how did those particles potentially get there?
It's kind of scary to think about, but those tiny plastic particles are probably getting into our bodies in a few ways. We might be breathing them in, swallowing them in food or water, or even getting them through our skin. Scientists are still trying to figure out exactly how dangerous they are, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
So it can potentially be in like lotion?
Yeah, it's possible that some lotions and other personal care products could have those tiny plastic particles in them. There's been some concern about this, especially with things like exfoliating scrubs that have little plastic beads in them.
Really? What about, are there any particular companies?
It's a bit tricky to name specific companies, since the issue with microplastics in products is ongoing and the list can change. Plus, sometimes the presence of these particles isn't always intentional, but there are some brands that are more transparent about their ingredients and have made efforts to remove microplastics from their products. You might want to look for brands that are certified as microplastic free.
You gotta look for microplastic free now? Good Lord. Okay. So what else is going on?
So, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Okay, there's also this new study about how listening to music can actually help your brain stay healthy as you get older. Apparently, it's good for your memory and can even help protect against dementia.
Okay, what type of studies have proven this?
There have been several studies on this, but some of the more notable ones have looked at people with dementia or Alzheimer's disease. They found that listening to familiar music can sometimes help them remember things or even communicate better. Other studies have focused on healthy older adults, and they show that listening to music regularly might help keep the brain sharp as we age.
All right, well, I'm going to need you to count just one more time in your funny little way. Let me know when you're about to begin.
Right, here we go. 1. And did you know that flamingos are pink because of the tiny shrimp they eat? 2. I heard about a guy who tried to start a hot air balloon business, but it never took off. 3. I read that cats spend about 70% of their lives sleeping. 4. Get this, a group of owls is called a parliament. 5. I've always wondered why they call it a building when it's already built. 6. Did you know that a snail can sleep for 3 years? 7. I heard that if you sneeze too hard, you can crack a rib. 8. I read that the average person laughs about 17 times a day. 9. Get this, a group of jellyfish is called a bloom. And 10. I've always wondered why they put locks on mailboxes. There's nothing valuable in there.
Well, I appreciate that. So we just finished our 1 mile walk. Yes. So let's just take a look at our progress. You see that progress? We're definitely up a mile. And just in the nick of time. All right, get it, got it, completed. Now, Gemini, you know you have to come through with the outro.
On YouTube, you wouldn't be vibing to this unless you already hit that like and subscribe button, right? Well, you know the drill. But seriously, come back tomorrow for another awesome video.